Welcome to video 2 for chapter 9. If you did not see video 1 on coordination, please go back and watch that. In this video, we'll be looking at subordination. So subordination is going to involve all of those subordinating conjunctions. This is one list. You see there are 50. This is not by any means an exhaustive list. So you can already see a big difference between coordination and subordination. Coordinating conjunctions were, again, a very small word class. There were only 7 of them. So if you remember fanboys, you can remember those 7. You're not going to be able to memorize all of the subordinating conjunctions because there are just so many. And unlike the coordinating conjunctions, you can see that some of these are actually multi-word phrases, right? For example, as soon as, or even though. They function as one chunk of language. We treat them as one conjunction, even though there are 2 words there. Okay, so how does subordination compare to coordination? Just like coordination, we are combining bits of language or chunks of language together. Conjunction means we're joining. But now, unlike the coordinating conjunctions, which are combining equal grammatical units, here we're combining 2 units together that are grammatically unequal. One chunk of language will be more prominent than another. Okay, this allows a writer to emphasize certain pieces of information, as well as specify some kind of logical relationship. Okay, so as we said with coordinating conjunctions in the last video, the most common, the most often used by far is the word and. And is, if I recorded everything that I said in one day, and would probably be one of the most frequently used words on the list, right? Dominated, right, by the coordination, okay? Coordination is a very simple structure. And again, it's all of the coordinating conjunctions, but, so, those are going to be very common in spoken language all over the place, okay? Some of the subordinated conjunctions are also more common, but then some of them are going to be a lot less common, okay? And more common in writing than speaking, okay? So subordination is going to be able to add more meaning. Look at example 12 there when I say Doris bought the cake and Douglas ate the cake. 2 people, 2 subjects, 2 predicates, they're both doing something, okay? We combine it with and. And doesn't really give us any extra meaning other than these 2 things are true. These 2 things happened. But if we look at all of the other examples, instead of using and, I can use the subordinating conjunction when. When is telling us at this time, okay? In B, we have the subordinating conjunction because. So now I have the meaning for this reason, okay? In 12C, we have the word though, okay? So now there's a contrasting idea. Something is unexpected. In D, we have the subordinate conjunction if. So this is conditional, right? In this sentence, Doris has not bought the cake yet. If she bought the cake, Douglas would eat it, right? But we don't know. After is more specific than when, before and after. So again, it's giving us a time phrase, and it's giving us more information. Subordination, not only do we have this unequal grammatical connection, but we typically have a lot more meaning. Okay, you can see that all of these examples, A through A, they have more meaning than just example 12, where I had a simple and. Okay, Sentence fragments. Some of you probably know that word very well. You had your English teachers in high school marking your paper saying fragment, fragment. Okay. All of these subordinate conjunctions, we just saw a list of 50 of them. There's more than 50. They're all over the place. Okay. They're so common. Okay. And now we're saying if you're going to use that, you're connecting something to a complete sentence, to an independent clause, right? And when we use that subordinate conjunction, that means that subordinate clause is a dependent clause. It is attached to that dominant independent clause. It cannot exist as a complete sentence in and of itself, right? If it gets disconnected from that independent clause, it becomes a fragment, as we see in the example 12F, right? If we didn't have that subordinating conjunction, I would simply have the sentence, Doris bought the cake. That's a complete sentence with a subject, verb, object. As soon as I add that subordinating conjunction, when, I've created a fragment. It could be if Doris bought the cake, because Doris bought the cake, even though Doris bought the cake. It doesn't matter which subordinate conjunction I use. The subordinate conjunction automatically turns that independent clause into a dependent clause. It is a piece of a sentence. Again, it is a subordinate clause, right? It's going to be less important, and it's attached to the main clause. And here in 12F, we don't have a main clause. So therefore, we have a fragment. My mental image is always this very strange looking anglerfish. This is such a fascinating fish, but one of the fascinating things about it is there, you see the little male fish just attaches itself and becomes permanently stuck to the female anglerfish. Well, that little male anglerfish is your subordinate clause. He cannot exist on his own, or he'd be a fragment. He's got to attach himself to that main clause, the dominant independent clause. All right, so let's look at some examples. 3 more examples here, number 13, 14, 15. All of these examples, the subordinate clause comes before the main clause. So when the subordinate clause begins a sentence, it's going to end with a comma, okay? Whether it's if or after and until. The comma tells the reader that this idea has ended, and what follows the comma is almost always going to be the subject of your sentence. So it lets the reader know that you or the crowd or we is the beginning of a new sentence, a new subject that will be followed by a new predicate. It does some heavy lifting there. Subordinate clauses can also come in the middle of a sentence. Okay, so number 16, we can see that the subordinate clause is immediately following the subject, in which case it will be enclosed in the front and behind by a comma. Okay, in number 17, the subordinate clause is immediately following the object of the sentence. Okay, and then we can see 18 as well. Both of them, again, because it's not part of the main clause, it's interrupting the main clause, it's going to be enclosed between 2 commas. This is by far the least common structure. It will be used sometimes by writers for emphasis or dramatic effect or something else, right? To insert that extra information that they think is important to go right after, whatever. But normally, unless you're trying to really emphasize something or you're telling a narrative and you want it for some kind of dramatic effect, normally you're not going to put a subordinate clause and interrupt the flow of the main clause. You'll put it at the beginning, like we saw, or you'll put it at the end of the sentence. Now let's look at these examples and see, do we have a subordinate clause? Where is it? Where's the main clause? Do I need to add a comma, or do I need to remove a comma? Or is the sentence correct? Pause the video and see, and then we'll check our answers. Okay, here we go. Number one, it's perfect, good. We start with the subordinate clause, it ends in a comma, and we start the main clause. Number two, we have a subordinate clause interrupting the flow of the main clause, so you need a comma before while and a comma after looking. The main clause being Ollie threw an eraser out the window. Number three, it's good. The subordinate clause comes at the end of the main clause, in which case I don't need a comma. Number four, the subordinate clause comes before the main clause, so I'm going to need a comma at the end. When the Saints go marching in, comma. Why isn't Saints capitalized, I wonder? I guess it's not the New Orleans Saints. Number five, we've got the main clause being Jeanette snored through the fire alarm. We interrupted that main clause with a subordinate clause starting with a conjunction although. So we enclose that in commas. Number five is good. Number six, although is the start of a subordinate clause that comes at the end of the main clause. So I don't need a comma. Okay, number six, we have an unnecessary comma. Try these examples, and again, if you want to look at these in more detail, they are in on page 144 in your textbook. Pause the video now, add a comma, delete a comma, or leave the sentence as is. Number seven, good, no comma, leave it as is. Number eight, if all my wishes were dishes, comma. Number nine, the computer, comma. Once Smith replaced the motherboard, comma. Worked like a dream. Number 10, there should be no comma here. You need to get rid of it. Number 11, good, leave it as is. Number 12, the comma is unnecessary. And in number 13, the roof, comma, whenever it rains, comma, leaks like a sieve. How did you do? Perfect, right? A little practice. Write a sentence that begins with a subordinate clause. Write a sentence that ends with a subordinate clause. Write a sentence with the subordinate clause in the middle. Number one would have a comma after that subordinate clause. Number two, the comma would be unnecessary. And number three, you're going to have two commas there surrounding that subordinate clause. So you want to pay attention to comma placement. If you can do these three things and you're confident about it, then you should be able to do it on a quiz or test or for homework and get your points. If any of these you're not sure about, okay, if you want me to check your work, send me an email with some of the practice exercises from these videos or from your textbook and ask me to check them and make sure that they're okay before I'm checking it for a grade. Okay, you can always send me practice. Some of those conjunctions again. Remember though that this is not an exhaustive list. This list will be posted on Moodle. Next up, we're going to talk about parallelism in video number 3. Thanks for watching.